Hello and welcome to a quick demonstration video of Polymorph's latest product, the Domino connector for Azure Logic apps. We're going to start by showing a very simple Domino database, possibly the most simple you can get, a very basic ordering system. We have a single form with several fields, a status, customer name, item and a value. The first three fields being text fields and the last field being a numeric field. We have 3 records in the database and 2 views, all orders and all orders categorized by the status of the order. The Azure Logic Apps platform has recently been released and allows non-developers to build solutions using a variety of components such as Twitter, Dropbox, SQL Server and SharePoint, and allows them to build together logical solutions using those components. So what Polymorph have developed is a Domino connector for this platform, which allows us to read and write data from the Domino platform and integrate it with all the other components available in the Azure marketplace for API apps. As you can see here, there are quite a few. Twilio for text messaging, Twitter for sending obviously tweets, various database and BizTalk connectors. So we'll quickly just dive in with a quick demonstration. So for this demonstration, we're going to pull some data from the sample database we've just mentioned and connect it into SharePoint and populate a list. So if we quickly just pop back to our Domino database, we can see we have the 3 records here with the fields company name, item, value and status. And in our SharePoint list, we've created the similar fields, customer, item, status and value. So what we're going to do is produce a workflow mapping that connects the data from Domino to the SharePoint list. So first thing we do is add the Domino API connector to our workspace, and at the moment in preview we have 3 or 4 functions available. We're able to retrieve document metadata from Domino by unique ID. We can set a text field back. In development at the moment is the ability to set date time fields and lists of fields and all those nice things. We can also get all the documents in a view back as the individual entries listed in the view, and we can also get all entries in the view but limit that to those within a certain category, which we'll touch on later. So for now what we're going to do is we're going to pull back every entry in this view. Now this form may well have more fields on it than those that are being shown in this view. For the purposes of this connector, however, we only export the fields we produce on the view, so we will only export these 4 fields into the connector. So we wish to get all entries in the view. All we simply do is type in the name of the view, which is all orders, and that's that. This connector now reads in the orders view from Domino. The details to connect to Domino we've already pre-configured when we first installed this API app into Azure Logic Apps. So we've already configured the host name to connect to the username and password that to use to authenticate against Domino. So this connector outputs several entries. It outputs a name, which is just the name in the view, so we already know what that is. It also outputs a list of entries, each one containing the universal ID, the form name of the document in the view, and then a collection of the fields within that document or that view entry. So what we need to do next is we need to add a SharePoint connector, which will act upon the output from the Domino connector. And here what we're going to do is we're going to insert into our Domino test list the fields we've extracted from the Domino connector. So if we just expand the fields we've got here, we have a title field in our list. We don't have one in Domino, so we're just going to put title in there. Sorry, first thing we should do, of course, is to add the repeating condition to this connector. So we have a list entries here, and we're going to repeat over that list of entries. If we didn't do that, we would only act on the first entry that was returned by the Domino connector, but we actually want to perform this action multiple times on each entry. So the only available list we have to select from is the get all entries in view entries, which is this piece here. So we're saying we'll be looping over that, and then for each individual field we just need to map the field name through to the field name in the list in SharePoint. So if we jump back to Domino and take a quick look, we have a quick look at the fields. They're all named pretty sensibly: customer, form, item, status and value. So all we need to do in our Logic app is to map these to a special property called the repeat item, which is the current context that we're looping around, and we reference the fields member of that, and then customer, for example, for this one. The item is called item, status is status, and value is value. And that's pretty much all there is to it. We have no title field, so we're just hard coding that to a title. Okay, so we've completed that. The SharePoint connector actually outputs some data as well. For each of the documents it's inserted into SharePoint, it also outputs the item ID, which we can do something with later on if we wanted to. We could, for example, add a Twitter connector and tweet every single item that was added to the list as well. So if we now save that and manually run this action, what we'll see is the Logic app starts to run below, and we can check the progress of the individual steps as they're running. So as we can see, the Domino API step ran successfully, which is our connector. That's ran for 9 seconds, and then the SharePoint connector ran successfully after that. We can, if you want to, you can inspect the inputs and the outputs to each of these to see the data that's flowing between them. Generally only useful during troubleshooting. Providing you're familiar with the fields you're importing and exporting, that should be fine. So if we now jump over to our SharePoint list and refresh, we should find that those 3 documents are now being added to SharePoint. So let's just delete those and start another test. So what we're going to do next is we're going to use the get entries by category connector. So what we now need to do is change our connector to use get all entries in view by category instead of get all entries in view, because we're only interested in selecting those documents which are open at the moment. So hopefully when we run this, we should only have 2 documents imported to SharePoint. So to achieve that, we change the selector type to get all entries in view by category. We need to change the view name to all orders by status. I believe that's the view name. And the category we want to select is open. So the Domino connector will now only select those documents that are categorized by open. We hope that will return 2, and it'll return the data in exactly the same format as the previous connector. So if we save that and run it manually, we should hopefully see 2 documents in the SharePoint list. Now that that's completed successfully, if I reload our SharePoint list, we only have 2. We only have the 2 open documents selected. Next, we want to quickly update a field back into Domino again. So what we'll now say is we've processed these 2 documents, these 2 open items. And what we're going to do is set a field back into there to say the status is now closed for those 2. So if we jump back into our Logic app and then remove our SharePoint connector because we're no longer adding data into SharePoint. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say, same as before, we're looking at the view all orders by status, we're getting the open category ones, and for the sake of the demo, we're now going to add another Domino connector to this and say, okay, what we're actually going to do is we're going to set a field in the document, set a text field. We use the unit, so the universal ID of the document, as the source, and again, we're acting on multiple documents that have been returned from this connector here, so we actually want to repeat over a list. So we're going to repeat over the entries that have been returned from the list. The unit for this will be the individual entries universal ID, which is this field here. So each entry has a universal ID as well as a list of fields. We then need to determine what field we're going to set on the document. So we're going to set status to closed in each of these documents. So in summary, this workflow will select all entries from the view all orders by status with a category of open, export that to the next connector, which also just happens to be a Domino connector. It could be anything else. We could be reading from SharePoint here. As long as we have the unit available, we can set that back again. So we're then going to repeat over those entries using the universal ID of the document as the key to update it, the unique identifier of the document, and we're going to set the status field to closed in each of those 2 documents. So if we save that and run that manually, We can see that both Domino connectors have now ran successfully, and with any luck, if we jump back into our Domino database, when we refresh this view, the statuses of these two documents should now change to closed, and they all join back into the same category. Okay, so that's been a fairly quick overview of some of the functionality available in our latest product. We hope it gives some idea of the kind of logical workflow apps that can be built together using our connector to basically opening Domino up to a whole variety of different data sources and feeds and outputs. And thanks for listening.